Do you remember holidays before the war? This was Brighton in July. The sun shone, the kids paddled, we ate lots of ice cream and had our photographs taken. Oh, we did like to be beside the seaside, didn't we? Some of us went with the family, some wanted to be alone. But whether it was the noise of Brighton or the quiet of Cornwall, we none of us thought the time would ever come when these shores of ours might have to be defended. But suddenly, war was upon us. With the grim possibility of invasion looming across the sea, we found our defenses sadly lacking. The army withdrew from Europe. The miracle of Dunkirk was achieved. France was beaten to her knees, and Hitler arrived in Paris. More guns than we ever dreamed would be necessary were needed at once. Now, guns can't be made in a hurry, and the coast artillery hadn't got them. But thank heaven the Navy had, and to spare. 6-inch, 4-inch, 4.7, all ages, all types, all serviceable. They sprang up round our coasts like mushrooms. Manned at first by Marines, they were later taken over by the Royal Artillery. And with the guns, they took over the new drill and fire control. Local rules, some inherited, some developed, crept in. And as the drills improved, the local rules often remained. This film is presented to you in order to clear up all differences and produce a standard drill to which you are asked to conform. So let's start right at the beginning. Now, first of all, do you know how to pick up a shell? Yes? All right, let's see you do it. Ouch! Ooh, look out for your fingers. Yes, hurts, doesn't it? Now look, this is supposed to be gun drill. After all, you may love your work, but you don't have to hug it like that. All right. Show him how, Sergeant. Now then, watch this. Right hand on the nose, tip it onto the left hand, then right hand to the base, and up. It only wastes energy to get it any higher than this. Now watch carefully and we'll do it again. Watch the hands. And here you are, clear of the respirator. This is the correct position. And if you practice that, you'll soon be able to do this. After all, it only weighs 100 pounds, and what's that to a good gunner? Hello, here's an old pal. Blood, tears, and sweat. And of course, it's not the real thing. But if you can do your stuff on this, you might be able to serve your gun. If you're no good here, you'll be worse in action. There's no such thing in war as being all right on the night.
Detachment, charge! Hell, up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, move! Detachment, prove your numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Line there. Elevation there. Later. Down.
Now, let's have a look at these positions in diagram. Here they are at detachment rear. We'll get rid of our layers first. Elevation layer goes to his telescope on the left. Line layer to his on the right. Sight setter to the range scale on the left. Number 1 stands where he can see and command the lot. Numbers 3 and 5 at the shells. Number 2 goes to the breech. Number 6 stands by the Clarkson cases to supply cartridges. Number 4 goes to the right of the rammer bucket and takes charge of the rammer. Got those positions? Right. Now let's see the movement of the loading numbers in diagram. 3 goes in first with his shell, helps to ram, loads the charge, and steps out. And as he comes out, in goes 5 without delay and does the same thing. 4 with 3 or 5 rams. 2 works the breech. And 6 supplies cartridges from the Clarkson cases, though we won't confuse the diagram by moving him here. See if you can spot their actions on dummy loader drill. There's 3 in with the shell, onto the shot guide, and round to ram. 6 is up with his cartridge, 3 puts it in and steps out, and here's 5. See how he sits back on his right leg to avoid recoil. You must take this work in the same spirit as the professional golfer practicing. Officers should be present wherever possible, watching for individual mistakes and correcting them. Keep instructional runs short, and always go flat out with a few long runs to harden the muscles. Remember, the big battle won't be 1 minute long. And if you don't get every movement as correct and easy as possible, you'll exhaust yourself in no time. And here on the gun, you see it's not so very different. There's a lot more noise. The gun recoils. There's smoke and sometimes flame when the breech is opened. But nothing that guts, determination, and a little common sense cannot overcome. And since it's this real-life practice that you lack, we'll slow it down and analyze it. Down goes 3 to his shell. Picks it up, and away to the breech. See how he slips the shell onto the shot guide. 4 is ready with the rammer. 3 reaches right back, and 4 orders ram. Look at the weight behind that one. 3 leaves the rammer and turns for his cartridge. 6 opens the lid upwards, and out comes a full charge. A lot more unwieldy than the dummy loader ones, aren't they? He inserts it up to the crook of the right arm, says in, and away he goes. Number 2 closes the breech till the lock starts to rise, inserts the tube and completes the movement, calling ready. Now, number 2 is a very important man. He's got to get that breech open, and holding it with his right hand against the weight of the shell on the shot guide, cock the lock with his left. Then he goes for a tube from his belt. 2 can, if he's slow, undo all the good work of the rest of the detachment. Practice makes perfect. Remember what Shakespeare said, once more into the breach, dear friends. So watch carefully and note your own points. And what have we here? A pay parade? Or is it dinner time? No, it's only the reserve watch coming into action. Remember, there are only 15 shell on the gun floor, and the reserve detachment have to maintain the supply of ammunition during action. Yes, it does look a bit of a mix-up, but don't worry, they're doing fine. Now, let's see where they go. Behind the gun are recesses, in which the reserve supply of ammunition is stored. Shell in one set of recesses, cartridges in another. And here's the reserve watch. Numbers 3, 4, and 5 go to the shell recess. Number 4 stays at the recess and passes out shells to number 3 and 5, who carry them to where numbers 3 and 5 of the duty watch require them. You'll notice that in this way, numbers 3 and 5 should be continually alternating in position, thus maintaining a steady flow from number 4 at the recess. Here is the shell recess. 3 and 5 get those shell to the gun as fast as they can, and even faster than that. Number 1 moves to a position from which he can supervise the whole job of ammunition supply. Now for the cartridges. Number 6, the elevation layer, number 2, and the sight setter are responsible for the supply of cartridges. The elevation layer and sight setter go to the recesses and issue them. 2 and 6 take filled Clarkson cases to 6 of the duty watch and return with the empties. They change positions in the same way as 3 and 5 do. Notice how the cartridges are taken from the boxes and the lifting bands removed before being put into the Clarkson cases. This isn't as easy as it looks and requires a lot of practice. The line layer moves to a position from which he can act as action lookout. He maintains this position and takes no part in ammunition supply. And so, with the reserve watch keeping up a steady supply of shell and cartridges, the duty watch can go all out. Never mind how many targets there may be, there'll always be plenty of shell to sink them. Now, it's not much use having first-class loading numbers on the gun if the layers aren't up to the same standard. And they should be, for laying on the naval mounting is pretty simple. This is what the line layer sees. His telescope has cross wires, and he lays the vertical wire on the bow waterline, like this. Or if the ship's going away, he puts it on the stern, like this. When following a target, he must keep the vertical wire on. This is bad following. always falling back, first behind, then overtaking and in front of it. You must get there and stay there. Like this. See? Once the vertical wire is on the bow waterline of the target, the layer must keep it steady by smooth traversing. The elevation layer has a fairly simple job too. His telescope has cross wires, and he sees the target like this. His job is to get the horizontal wire on the bow waterline and keep it there. There's no question of depressing last. He just gets on and stays put. When the target turns away, he too lays on the stern waterline. So you see, both layers lay on the same thing. One for line, one for elevation. Now, how does this laying put the gun on the target? Well, it's done by the principle of tangent elevation, and this is how it works. Tangent elevation is the angle between the line of sight, which runs from the telescope to the target, and the axis of the bore when the gun is laid. An imaginary straight line running through the center of the bore. There's the angle between the two lines, tangent elevation. Now, the angle of tangent elevation will cause the line of sight and the trajectory of the shell to meet at the target. It varies with every range and is the basic principle of gun laying with the 6-inch naval. The angle is applied to the gun in this way. When all scales are at 0, both the line of sight and the axis of the bore are pointing in the same direction, at the target. Then, when the sight setter puts the range on his dial, he automatically depresses the layer's telescope, and so the line of sight, below the axis of the bore. In order to get back on the target, the layer must elevate, and in doing so he moves both gun and telescope, and thus applies the tangent elevation for that particular range to the gun. Got it? Got it. Here is the sight setter, and this is the cam which does the job. The sight setter receives the range by telephone from the clock operator in the BOP and puts it on the range scale plate. This automatically moves the cam, which forces up the sight arm to an amount equivalent to the tangent elevation, thus depressing the telescope and making the cross wires do this. The elevation layer, of course, tries to get them back on the target. Like this, see? And because layers always win, the sight setter has yet another way of sabotaging the good work. Here it is. He can turn this little wheel and put on, for instance, left 1 degree. This has the effect of throwing the line layer's sight over to the right 1 degree. Now, this dirty work makes the line layer traverse the gun and sight to get back onto the target. The gun, of course, is now 1 degree left of where it was. Elementary, my dear Watson. All we want to know now is something about the source from which the sight setter gets his ranges and how he receives them. They come down by telephone from the clock operator in the BOP, who operates a form of clockwork joss box called, curiously enough, the clock. Here it is. Briefly, the clock operator, by turning this milled knob, sets the clock to the rate of change of range ordered by the battery commander. Then, with this other knob, he adjusts the face of the dial to bring the hairline over the range ordered. He then reads and transmits to the sight setter every change of 25 yards in range. The sight setter repeats the initial range and checks back every 100 yards. The sight setter receives line deflections by loudspeaker from the BC-AC and repeats before applying them. And that's how the gun's laid. There's nothing mysterious about it, and if you do your job properly, it'll simply be a waste of time for the enemy to come over. So you see, it's teamwork as does it. Whether at work or at play, teamwork is an absolute essential to the production of results. Each individual must know his own job, and all must sink their personalities into the team. They must train together to make themselves an efficient machine that runs smoothly, ready to have a crack at anything.